to start a dialogue stupidly and badly. Because that's how you have to start. You know, we talked already about the idea of tolerance. And I'm actually not here to be tolerant. You know, because tolerance sort of presumes that I know what I'm doing and you guys don't, but I'll put up with you anyways. And see, I don't actually think I know what I'm doing exactly. And so I think, well, you might have something to teach me. And so it's not so much tolerance as, I would say, hopefully something approximating an expression of reasonable humility, which is, well, first of all, we occupy the same space. And as far as I'm concerned, it'd be better if we got along. And we've all had our own revelations, you know, personally and let's say socially. And we don't know how to integrate those revelations. And that's rough, that's hard. And so I'm here to listen.
Now, before I move on, I have to give you a warning. What I'm about to say is going to be very, very, very offensive to a lot of people. So if you are a staunch supporter of Judeo-Christian philosophy, this is the time to stop this video and move on. Alrighty? So there was a war between two clans. Like, these are the people belonging to the same household, like they're blood related. Okay, they are not just relative, but they are actually blood related. So the Battle of Kurukshetra took place between these two clans. There was Kauravas on one side, who had the might. There were 100 brothers. And there were then Pandavas on the other side. There were only 5 brothers. They had the right. So Krishna, divinity, God incarnate Krishna, he took the side of the right, like he appointed himself as the advisor to the side of the right, to the Pandavas. And then he obviously gave his army to the side of the might, the Kauravas. So it was a war between might and right. Okay. So how do you uphold civilization? What was the message? Like, Bhagavad Gita was delivered in this battlefield, the Battle of Kurukshetra. So Krishna's message was that even if you are weak, even if you are small in numbers, you have to take up the arms to fight to destroy the evil. You have to take up the arms to fight to destroy the evil. So Krishna obviously, like he was the advisor, he didn't take up the arms. He told Arjuna, his disciple Arjuna, to kill his own family. So Arjuna was overwhelmed. Okay, like, how can I kill my family? How can I slaughter my own family? And then, of course, Krishna gave Arjuna divine vision. Krishna gave Arjuna divine vision that you are never born, you will never die, you exist for eternity, that the soul, there are lots of things, like I highly recommend that you read that conversation. I highly recommend, like I cannot recommend highly enough, that you are going through a cycle of life and death until you reach perfection. Journey of a Pashu to Pashupati. Pashu, it's an animal. Pashu is Sanskrit word Pashu. Pashupati, when you add the word Pati at the end of the noun, Pashupati, Pashupati is the nickname for Lord Shiva. So journey of a Pashu to Pashupati. Journey of an animal, like it's a metaphor, it's not just animal. Everything that, behold my hundreds and thousands of wonderful forms, that everything moving, non-moving, within this universe is me. You are going through this cycle of life and death until you reach perfection, until you reach freedom. We talked about freedom. What exactly is freedom in the last episode? So Krishna is talking about divine vision, the vision that you cannot achieve with your mortal body. When this John Locke and Voltaire, this Western liberalism, you guys cannot understand the most basic notion of civilization. What is civilization? Again, we talked in the last episode. You have to suppress these negative tendencies and you have to uphold these positive tendencies. That's the most foundational principle of civilization. And this is where the notion of discrimination comes along. This is where the notion of choice comes along. This is where the notion of responsibility comes along. See, Bhagavan Krishna is saying that, behold my hundreds and thousands of wonderful forms in various shapes, sizes and colors, the notion of divine vision. So he is talking about life, that everything moving, non-moving within this universe is but me. So what is life? Life is this change. Life is this variety. One of the fundamental elements of life is that life changes. So the question is, in this variety, in this change, where do you find unity? Like this video is about Dr. Jordan Peterson, where he argued that the ultimate purpose of life is what? Making peace, which I wholeheartedly disagree.
Is there an ultimate purpose of life?
Yeah, sure.
What is it?
What we're doing here,
Which is what?
hopefully trying to make peace.
And the reason for this disagreement, like I explained many of the things in my previous video, and one of the fundamental reasons as to why I disagree with this statement is because life is about change. That what is life? If you have to define life with one word, what is that single word that defines life? Change. If you come to Hinduism, Hinduism says that this life has two elements, Purusha and Prakriti. What is Purusha? Something that does not change. And then you have the Prakriti, everything else that is constantly evolving, constantly changing. So you have Purusha and Prakriti. So what is the ultimate purpose of life according to Hinduism? The ultimate purpose of life according to Hinduism is to know this truth, is to know that you are the self, you are that Atman, you are that Purusha, you are that unchangeable. Knowing the truth. And Hinduism says that this nature is nothing but an illusion, a Maya. So Bhagavan Krishna says that every action that you take, it doesn't matter what you do, whether you are eating, whether you are sleeping, whether you are looking at something, even when you are learning, every choice that you make, every action that you take, it leads either towards Purusha or towards Prakriti, either towards freedom or towards bondage. Think about it this way. This is a coin, it has a head and a tail. Now, of course, by head, I don't necessarily mean it has a big giant head of a cobra. That is not what I'm saying. It has two sides. Just the same way, let's say, for instance, light and darkness. I have light in my face, and that is precisely the reason why I have darkness in the back. Okay? We have a head and a tail. So life is about this duality. You have to distinguish, you have to make these distinctions in every aspect of life. Whether you are sitting, whether you are sleeping, whether you are eating, even when you learn caste system, like we will talk about caste system in detail in the very next episode, okay? So bear with me for a moment. So every aspect of life, according to Hinduism, has to be analyzed under this framework, under the framework of discrimination, because this discrimination is the source of all the changes that happens in the world, is the ultimate cause of life itself. That one of these actions, whichever action you take, it doesn't matter whichever action you take, every action either leads you towards this head or this tail, either leads you towards freedom or towards bondage. So even if you do not see, nonetheless, you are still discriminating. You are still making a particular choice. So this choice, this discrimination is what? Is the bedrock of civilization, is the bedrock of life. So how do you create this peaceful society? Like putting all of those things aside, like Purusha, Prakriti and all those things aside, putting the philosophy aside, that how can you create a peaceful society? To create a peaceful society, you have to uphold this individualism. You need the notion of responsibility. You need to find unity in this variety. So how do you find this unity? You find this unity through discrimination. You find this unity through taking up responsibility. What is life? Life is this change, life is this variety. So you have to uphold this variety. You have to uphold this individualism. Without this individualism being upheld, you cannot maintain, you cannot sustain life. Again, all of these arguments are actually coming from Swami Vivekananda. He argues that the moment when you resort to a particular state, let's say for instance a peaceful society, this is a state. When you reach that equilibrium, when you reach that ideal state, guess what happens? Creation stops. Creation will not happen if there is only one state. Creation can only happen in this change. When you stop to appreciate this variety, when you stop to appreciate this change, that is when life also stops, because life is nothing but this change. The question is how you look at it. Creation and destruction, not the same thing, just how you look at it. How you look at it. Light and darkness, how you look at it. You may call it destruction, but life, this is about change. It is nothing but life. When you embrace life, you embrace creation as well as destruction. You embrace light as well as darkness. You embrace this head as well as this tail. So every action that you take, every choice that you make, it has to be analyzed under this discrimination. Again, you are already discriminating. The question is, are you aware of this discrimination? Are you aware of this distinction yourself? This is the question that Hinduism poses to humanity. Now the obvious question is that what happens when you fail to distinguish? What happens when you fail to discriminate? Or you try to stop this discrimination? As we just explained, life is about this discrimination. So what happens when you stop, when you fail to uphold this discrimination? What happens then? That is when life stops. That is when life becomes stagnant. I give you a couple of examples. Let's say for instance, good and evil. How good and evil is defined? Now, one of the key misunderstanding in this dialogue of Judeo-Christian philosophy is the notion of good and evil. Like, what is this universe is all about? It's a divine play between good and evil. This is what universe is all about. Like, if you look at any matter, there is something good, there is something evil. A human being or an animal or anything. So this good and evil is actually inseparable. And this divine play is the essence of civilization. But if you come to Hinduism, Hinduism does not necessarily distinguish between this good and evil, because obviously that resides within you. And Hindus are saying that because it resides within you, you have to perform yoga, suppression of the negative tendencies and uplifting of the positive. Okay, the notion that came out of Patanjali, the notion of yoga, that arousing of the kundalini, the good energy, and bringing it to the Sahasrara so that you can attain freedom. But this is not the view of the Judeo-Christian philosophy. Like, what do you see in Judeo-Christian philosophy? You see that you have Allah and Satan. You have Christ and Antichrist. So how do you suppress, when we are saying that you have to suppress the negative tendencies and uplift the positives, how do you suppress this negative, evil? You have to fight them like physically, because they exist outside of you. There is no other way to suppress them. If they were inside of you, then the notion of yoga comes along. Arousing of the kundalini. You can arouse your kundalini. But when you look at Judeo-Christian philosophy, you look at, like, especially not just Islam is obviously, Christianity as well. Okay. You see violence, like what are the reasons behind this violence? Violence against the non-believer. You have an entity, an evil entity that resides outside of you, non-believer. And that's why these Judeo-Christian philosophies have been the catalyst for slaughter, for genocide of hundreds of millions of people. Because there is no other way to eliminate evil. You have to eliminate the non-believers, isn't it? They reside outside of you. This is one of the fundamental distinctions I want to clear it up. Like when people are saying that how can there be millions of gods and goddesses, one of the questions that you will see coming from the Judeo-Christian people, from the Judeo-Christian philosophies, they fail to recognize the fact that these millions of gods and goddesses, like this is the notion of Advaita philosophy of oneness, Krishna's divine vision. What is the highest of all philosophy? The highest of all philosophy is this Advaita philosophy of oneness. That how do you get to this Advaita philosophy? How do you come to this oneness? Again, you can be free, like arousing this kundalini, this good energy, bringing it to the Sahasrara, become free. Then you can attain that divine vision, perhaps. But this notion, Advaita philosophy of oneness, is completely foreign to people coming from Judeo-Christian philosophies. They see world as they themselves as good, chosen people, and everyone else as evil. And when you have this kind of flawed idea, this kind of lackluster idea, to put it bluntly, then how do you expect peace out of this kind of philosophies? That is one of the questions that I want to ask Dr. Peterson. Like, if you are saying that you want to get to peace, right? This is your proposition, not mine. My proposition is freedom. But let's assume that you are right. If you think that you want to go to peace, can you actually go to peace with the notion of evil that resides outside of you? Unbelievers, so to speak. Can you attain peace from this kind of civilizational model? You can't. There'll always be antagonism, there'll always be hostility. Because you have to find someone to blame. Unbelievers. So you can never be at peace with the unbelievers. And that is exactly what you see in case of Islam. They are the worst of all creatures. They have to be fought against, they have to be subjugated, they have to be butchered, on and on and on. So that's one of the key misconceptions I thought I might as well clear up. Now, as we are discussing this good and evil, I just want to point out a psychological notion. The notion of association. What it simply means is this, that if you associate yourself with good, you become good. You associate yourself with evil, you become evil. Birds of the feather flock together. In other words, it means that the environment can have a very deep impact on who you become. Because psychology, the notion of association, suggests that if you associate with evil, you become evil. So it is basically an environment that is having an impact on you. If that is the case, then how do you justify these good and evil being two completely separate things? This notion, the current understanding of Judeo-Christian psychology or Judeo-Christian philosophy, if you put it under the scrutiny, under the notion of association, can it be justified that these two beings can be completely separate? If you look at the Indic perspective, we are saying that this good and evil resides within you. And the notion of association can be justified in this manner. You associate with good, you become good, arousing that kundalini, that good energy, that pure energy, whatever it is. But if you think that the good can exist or the evil can exist only outside of you, then what is the impact of the environment? Can it be justified in terms of psychology? Can this notion of good and evil being two separate entities be justified by the notion of association, by psychology. So I think these ideas are fundamentally flawed. When we are saying that these good and evil that exist outside of you, okay, these notions cannot be justified by psychology. These notions are utterly and entirely flawed. And there is yet another example that is even more striking. Let's say, for instance, the notion of monotheism. What is monotheism? That if there is a God, there is only one God. Now, it may sound very intuitive that how can there be multiple gods? Like some of the arguments that come precisely out of the Abrahamic philosophies is that how can a cow be a god? How can a dog be a god? Bhagavan Krishna is talking about divine vision, that behold my hundreds and thousands of wonderful forms. Again, because we are talking about change, we are talking about life. Life is about variety. Anyway, so monotheism suggests that if there is a God, there is only one God. So this monotheism, although it may sound very intuitive, it may look right, it comes with a very serious problem. It goes against life. It comes with collectivism. There are some assumptions when this one God theory is being implemented via monotheism. Let's take, for instance, the case of Islam. First pillar of Islam is what? Shahada. What is Shahada? That there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. That you are taking an oath of allegiance where you are confirming that there is no God but Allah. What is the key word here? No God but Allah. I am not against someone trying to say that there is only one God. But when you say that there is only one God, what comes out of this one God is where the problem is. And in Islam, it says this is the worst of all sin. That what is the gravest of all sin is to commit shirk, is to associate partners with Allah. So now you can clearly see that there is an element of exclusion. There is an element of rejection. What comes of this rejection? Fanaticism. If you want to follow Allah, that's fine. But when you say there is no other God, when you are disassociating yourself or whoever wants to follow Islam from all the other gods and goddesses, all the variety, all the change, guess what you end up with? You end up with fanaticism. Because this is an idea of exclusivity. You are saying that there is no God but Allah. That means you have to reject all the other gods and goddesses. You have to reject variety. You have to reject change. As we just discussed, what is life? Life is this change. That means you are going against life. And if you look at Christianity, this deification does not go beyond Jesus Christ. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit. Like before Jesus was born, He was the Father. When Jesus is born, He is Jesus Christ. And after His death, He was resurrected as a Spirit. So Father, Son, and Spirit. This deification does not go beyond Jesus Christ. Okay? Once again, we are stuck with the same problem. You are going against this change. You are going against this variety. You are going against this individualism. You end up with collectivism, believers and unbelievers. And in Islam, unbelievers are the worst of all creatures, and in Christianity, unbelievers will be burning in hell for eternity. They will be eternally barbecued. Once again, when you have this kind of ideas, when you go against life, when you fail to appreciate this individualism, you essentially destroy society. So going back to Dr. Jordan Peterson's argument that the ultimate purpose of life is to make peace, putting all the philosophy aside, even if you want to make peace, what do you need as a model? You need discrimination. You need this change. You need this variety. Because this is fundamentally what life is. What I came across time and time again in this Abrahamic philosophy is that is always, like Christianity or Islam, these ideologies always prescribe against this change. whichever ideology you choose, whether you choose Islam or you choose Christianity, both of these ideologies, they are against this change, they are against this life, they are against this variety. And I think this is a fundamental problem if you want to create a peaceful society. And that is why I fundamentally disagree with Dr. Peterson, which again I outlined many of the reasons as to why I disagree in my previous video, in the video that goes before this one. Okay, so long story short, to uphold this civilization, to create a peaceful society, you first of all, you have to implement this notion of discrimination. Without this notion being implemented, you cannot create a peaceful society. And then you look at some of the other things, not only the examples that I just described, that what comes out of this exclusion. We are talking about rejection of all the other gods and goddesses. What does it do? It creates a window for fanaticism. Although it's talking about unification, like Muslims say that they unified Arabia. But under this facade of unification, under this facade of monotheism, under this facade of one God theory, what they brought instead is fanaticism. So to uphold civilization, you have to uphold this individualism. You have to appreciate this change. When you stop this change, when you stop this individualism, you end up with collectivism. You end up with stagnation.